Hi everyone, and welcome back to Talking ELT, the easiest place to learn about the big issues in language teaching. This is our final episode on the topic of multimodality, and I'm joined again by Ed, Charlotte, and Nick to wrap up the conversation.
So, a lot of the conversation today has been around how teachers can support students and how they can help learners develop their multimodal literacy. But also publishers and materials designers play a huge role in this as well. And I think it's important to talk about that too. So, Nick, I know you do a lot of materials design, and Ed, I know you do quite a bit for Oxford as well. And Charlotte, you do some.
I've dabbled. Yes.
So yeah, I guess my question is how do you ensure that the materials you design support multimodal literacy?
I mean, for me, because they do.
Okay.
Because I'm lucky in that I produce materials for myself,
Yes.
for my own company that I then market, and that's something that I really enjoy doing. And so, because I'm really interested in it, I can sort of bake those things in.
Okay.
So I can make sure that I'm using video, and I can put in those tasks that are silent viewing that I love to do. And if nobody likes them and they don't buy my materials, well, that's not the end of the world. I'm doing what I love, so
Yeah.
that's fine. So, but yeah, you can put those things in. I think it's probably maybe a bit more difficult if you're a bigger publisher, and particularly if you're kind of paper course book orientated.
Yes.
Then it becomes much more difficult. How do you supply the video? And
Yes.
and there are lots of issues around copyright and protecting that and things like that. But it's possible. As a materials writer, it's not a challenge. I think it's more difficult as a publisher to sort of to ensure the integrity of your materials and things like that once they're out there.
From my work perspective, I do a lot of work developing teacher education courses or professional development courses for teachers of English, and the move to online courses has definitely been a massive catalyst for this kind of thing. And I think that for many years, when these teacher education courses were done face-to-face, there seemed to be far less appetite or need for this, because you had a trainer in the room working with a group of people, and there was face-to-face contact, and everything felt very, very kind of engaging. But the move to online, and especially asynchronous learning online, was really a kind of it seemed to be a very, very kind of stark and rather kind of dull environment. And one thing that we discovered was that participants found it very tiring and very kind of hard going to be endlessly reading and writing. So it was consume a text, write a response in a forum or something like that. We thought originally, there's interactivity, so that's going to be enough. But in fact, there is a certain kind of text fatigue that sets in. And so it's been incredibly important for us, based on the feedback that we've had from teachers, to have alternatives to pure text input. So, for example, a recording, whether that's an audio recording or a video recording, or an animation, or some kind of combination of an educator speaking with some kind of infographic or graphic organizer to summarize those thoughts, so that when people are taking part in the course receptively, they have a whole balance of different types of information coming in different ways. And that I think has made it a much more engaging experience. But also from the productive side as well, it has been, I think, really important for us to find ways for participants to share their opinions and their thoughts and their views, not just through typing them, which has both a kind of fatigue element, but also other kind of potential red flags, and instead move to a system where it can be a combination of text and audio video recording using the built-in recorder in the platform that we use. So take a prompt, give your response in a short video that you make, or add your ideas to a collaborative board. So I think that it's not only something which adds kind of style and has a kind of design appeal, but it's also something which prevents people from dropping out and sustains interest and makes the whole kind of learning experience a whole lot more engaging. And I think that now, if you try to run if you try to create any kind of resource for a teacher or for any other professional that didn't contain this variety of multimodal input, that it would probably not be massively successful.
Yeah, that makes sense. I can see that.
Yeah, it's interesting. I just want to pick up on sort of Ed talking about, this recent shift to online, and how that's, actually lent itself quite well to multimodal literacies. But I think it's important to actually state, and I don't know whether we have stated it so far, that actually we're not talking about anything new when we talk about multimodal literacy. And I know we've shared a lot of anecdotes of, back in the day when we used cassettes and did this with graphs and things. And I think that's really important, actually, to say this. We're not talking about something that is new. We are talking about maybe new shifts to learning, which have that in turn lent themselves well to using multimodal literacy as part of that sort of training or learning experience. And when I think about when I was in the classroom, and I would use YouTube videos a lot in my learning, in my teachings, and course books as well would always come with some form of audio aspect to them, and whether that was finding your place on the cassette player and getting ready to press play at that time when you needed it, and having to rewind back whilst the students were engaged doing something, or it's the evolution to sort of using MP3s in the class. So it's always been something that's been around, and I think consciously or not, we as educators have always used it in our lessons. I don't know many teachers who have strictly stuck to using those more traditional forms of literacy that you mentioned at the start of this podcast, Chris. But I think that can change depending maybe on where in the world you're teaching,
of course,
what resources you have access to, but the knowledge of those resources, I wouldn't say is a completely new concept to us as teachers and learners as well.
I want to pick up on the word you used of having access to resources. And one of the things I've definitely learned is this whole idea of accessibility of online materials. And I learned about this the hard way through having a course participant who was visually impaired, and so needed to have a reader who would take the PDFs in this case and read them out to them. So that immediately shows that there's a potential hindrance, but also a massive opportunity for using multimodal input that ticks a variety of boxes. So you have a text, but there's also a recording of that text. And you have an image, but there's also an alternative text which describes what's in the image. And that we make sure, just through its best practice for accessibility really, but that will help us, that will shepherd us into that path of making sure that we have kind of multimodal input, because we don't want people to be excluded based on any kind of audio or visual impairment that they have. But it also provides and ensures a more engaging learning environment as well. So,
I was going to ask about that, and the way that multimodal texts do provide that opportunity for inclusivity in a new way. I think that's really important.
And it has been, I think, badly neglected by publishers and by professionals over the years. And it's high time that we did something about that. So I think it's better late than never, really, is the best way to kind of describe what's happening, but it's certainly important.
Yeah, definitely.
I mean, to come back to your original question about writing materials and things like that, I think it is very easy, or it could be very easy for a teacher listening to this and hearing about multimodal literacy, thinking, oh my God, that's something else I've got to learn how to do and how to change, and how do I do that? And it sounds really complicated, but in a way, it isn't such a huge shift. A lot of it is to do with using the materials that you already have in a slightly different way with some additional tasks that focus on additional things. I think I was asked to go through an OUP course book just recently to look at ways that multimodal literacy could be built into it, and when I looked through it, the writer had written some things in that were connected with those things already. They weren't highlighted as being multimodal literacy, but they were just there, it shows there is some move towards that, and it doesn't have to be this huge leap of change. It doesn't have to be.
No, and I think that is really important to emphasize about everything we've talked about, that this doesn't have to be a big scary new thing. It can just be adapting the practice you're currently doing and shifting the perspective slightly.
And it can be dripped in little stages and things like that. It doesn't have to be kind of an overnight big shift or anything like that.
Because it's better to do, I would say it's better to support multimodal literacy a little bit effectively rather than try and do it all at once and feel that you can't do it. Like do what I think it's important for teachers to do what they are able to do in their context, depending on what resources they have access to, what assessment expectations their schools might provide for them, and what they feel comfortable with. I think it is important to tailor it to your own situation.
Okay, so I've got a question for you guys.
Okay.
How, if we were kind of brainstorming ideas that a teacher could get for using this podcast recording, what kinds of things could they do with it, which would be an example of multimodal literacies in practice?
Okay.
I've got one idea to start with.
Go on.
Show a photograph of the speakers.
Yep.
And then play the audio track of them speaking and try to match the speaker to the picture. Try to guess which one is which, and then to say why.
I like that.
Some might be easier than others.
Don't know what you mean, Ed.
Is that the kind of thing that would fit the, is that an example of the kind of thing we could do?
Though maybe rather than just photos, maybe some of the video with the sound off. So you can see them doing their body language.
Oh, right,
and
yes.
That's whose body language matches whose voice.
Yeah, okay.
That's interesting. I like that.
It could also be something, I guess, of like trying to guess what they're talking about, either from a menu of choices or through some other kind of hint or clue or suggestion. Not quite sure how well that one's going to work, but I'm just thinking on my feet here.
You could do something about body language connected with turn taking. How does this person signal that they want to enter the conversation? How does this person signal that they've finished their turn?
Yeah.
There's also a nice thing I tried doing once with getting students to count head nods. Apparently, when you're talking, you kind of your head bobs up and down a bit, and when you finish a sentence, it drops.
That's interesting.
And so you can count. You should be able to count the head drops to see how many sentences they made. So.
What about playing the same clip twice, once on video and once on audio, and getting students to describe the ways in which it was a different experience, or superior or inferior, and why?
Yeah.
I like that.
And maybe, analysing sort of phonetics around what we're saying, when the intonation is used with whatever it is we're talking about, and how that maybe affects the message that we're trying to deliver.
Yeah.
You could take a short clip of one person speaking and another person reacting and turn it into a meme.
Yes. Please,
So what was that person
please
saying?
don't.
What's their
No,
response?
That is it.
please don't turn us into a meme. We don't want to be a meme.
See, this one's a good one. There's the response.
There's the meme. There we go. There we go.
And you're asking for it now.
I know. I shouldn't have said that. I've ruined it. It's going to be awful. Oh.
Someone's always the butt of a joke in a meme.
Yes, yeah, and it will be me. We know it will be me.
Another nice one. Well, I think it's nice
Yes.
anyway. How did they decide what to wear?
Oh,
How did they choose what to wear, and what were they thinking when they chose what to wear for this?
that's a good one. I like that.
You also mentioned that we were coming back after lunch, Chris.
I did.
And,
I
is
did.
there a change in energy?
Yeah.
Pre-lunch, post-lunch?
Yeah.
And how do we know, and how do we recognise that?
Which one had coffee?
Which one had coffee? Which one didn't?
Which one had too much coffee?
Yes. No, I like that. I think the other thing which popped to mind is looking at the actual, and this was slightly separate, look at the actual format of the video podcast itself and analysing that. So the very fact that the camera's going to be moving between us when we're talking, and that is a decision to have it focus on either the person talking or potentially on the person reacting to that, and how those choices have been made in order to convey information. And another one popped into my head. We have a lovely logo. And how did we decide upon that logo, and why does it connect to what we're talking about or the format of what we're doing, I guess.
But yeah, looking at a podcast as you know, a genre of being able to communicate, you know, I think there's many an activity out there where we get learners to analyse, you know, the front page of a newspaper and think about, well, what is the aspects of this that, you know, tell us that this is a newspaper, you know, looking at, you know, the way that the language has been used, the layout, the design, and yeah, why not apply those same sort of analysis to a podcast?
Yeah,
it's a great idea, Chris.
Yeah, no, I think that would work. I quite like that one. There was one which, the other one that popped in my head. Off the back of that, you could get students to create their own podcast.
Exactly. I was thinking that they could do a kind of recreation of this and give it little twists and added dimensions.
Yeah.
I used to do something with discussions where each speaker in the classroom would have a kind of mentor who would give them advice afterwards.
Okay.
And that's another thing that you could do. If you choose one of the 4 speakers to mentor, and, you know, as you watch, just make notes of things that you liked about what they did and said, and things that you would suggest that they bring into their next podcast, and why.
Yeah.
Another way of making it a little bit more kind of immersive from the listener's perspective.
That's really interesting. Well, thank you all so much for joining me to discuss all this today. It's been really interesting and really fun, and I've definitely learned quite a lot here, which I didn't know beforehand. So thank you all so much. And we hope everyone watching has enjoyed this conversation. If you have any questions, pop them down in the comments. So again, thank you all for joining me today.
Thank you,
it's been
Chris.
really good.
Thanks
Thank
for
you.
hosting.
Thanks for listening to this episode of Talking ELT. That brings us to the end of our series on multimodality, and I just want to say a big thank you to Ed, Charlotte, and Nick for joining us. We'll be back soon with more episodes on topics like pronunciation, mediation, and more, so make sure to like and subscribe if you want to hear those. While you're waiting, you can download our position paper on multimodality for more practical advice and resources to empower your teaching. Just follow the link in the description. Thanks for joining us.